If you're running a retail business, don't let disorganized order fulfillment cause chaos. Use ShipStation instead. From running a business out of your garage to multiple warehouses, ShipStation is ideal for every phase of your growth. Save time with one login for all your stores and by automating tasks. Plus, you'll get the best shipping rates from global carriers. Calm the chaos with the shipping software that delivers. Start a free trial at shipstation.com/audio. That's shipstation.com/audio.
Hey everyone, Laszlo Montgomery here. We're back once again with another new episode in this 18-part series that introduces the history of Chinese philosophy. In the next couple episodes, we're going to explore Daoism and what that's all about. Today we will retrace our steps backward along the China history timeline and return to the 6th century BC to look at Lao Tzu, Zhuangzi, and the teachings of Daoism. Will Durant said it best when he said, Lao Tzu, the greatest of the pre-Confucian philosophers, knew the wisdom of silence and lived, we may be sure, to a ripe old age, though we are not sure he lived at all. Tradition, which knows everything, credits him with his book, the Dao De Jing, and his name, Lao Tzu, neither of which may have belonged to him. End quote. And from a historical point of view, that nearly sums it up as far as who Lao Tzu was. His short work, the Tao Te Ching, also called the Laozi, has to be attributed to someone. Someone had to conveniently exist who could be quoted and referred to. The Laozi of the ancient classics could have been an amalgamation of several people who yielded all this wisdom over time. If they were one person, it's still hard to say if the words we read today, many of us in translation, are from this person from 2,600 years ago. China today is about 4 million square miles, but back in Lao Tzu's day, the Han Chinese people were spread out thinly, mostly in and around the Yellow and Wei River valleys, parts of Shanxi, Hebei, Henan, Shandong, Anhui, the usual suspects. Less than 40 million people in total. And as we all discussed in previous episodes, those days when Lao Tzu was around, the Chinese political state was hardly what it used to be. Things were so bad that there were people who embraced the thought that maybe it was best to just escape from the danger, return to nature, and live like a hermit or a recluse. Forget about society and order and etiquette, not under these conditions. It was better to get away from all the madness, live a life of simplicity out in nature, acting naturally, not constrained by anyone's rules, and to look out for oneself. People who thought this way, these were Daoism's initial core customers. In discussing Lao Tzu's biography, I hate to say it again, but this is one of those thank God for Sima Qian kind of things. The record of the grand historian, we have to hang our hat once again on that ancient work written during the Han Dynasty. It states Lao Tzu came from Chu, which tells you a little bit right there. Chu country was Hubei. They had a different culture than what was going on in and around the Yellow River and all its tributaries. The Chu people were very spiritual, living where they did along the Yangtze River, south of the core ancient Huaxia Chinese civilization, all along the Yellow River. Tradition says Lao Tzu's surname was Li, and his full name was Li Er. His courtesy name was Dan, so he's also referred to as Li Dan. Lao Tzu itself just means old master, and here in Hollywood we also know him as Lao Tzu. Although he was famous for his contempt of government, Lao Tzu still earned his daily rice from the Zhou ruling family, working as a historiographer in the Zhou Royal Archives. Confucius visited Lao Tzu once in an official capacity. I told you that story, so we know from the reply he gave to Confucius that Lao Tzu was already the feisty, contemptuous old chap that he's often portrayed as. Confucius makes several mentions of meeting a Lao Dan. Some believe he was referring to the philosopher known as Lao Tzu, and that his surname was Lao, not Li. It shall remain a mystery. The rest of Lao Tzu's story, according to tradition anyway, goes something like this. He was still working his job in Luoyang as a curator at the Zhou Royal Library, when one day he just up and left. So disturbed and revolted had he become in the way society and government had deteriorated. These were the Zhou kings Ling and Jing. He decided he had had enough. So Lao Tzu hit the road on the back of an ox, if you believe Sima Qian. And as the story goes, he headed in a westerly direction towards the outer frontiers of Zhou Dynasty China. As he got to the very last stop before one left what was considered Zhongguo, or China, the guardian of the gate, a gentleman by the name of Yin Shi, recognized Lao Tzu. As you recall from Confucius's reaction from meeting Lao Tzu, the old master was already quite a celebrity in his day, and because of this, his fame had preceded his arrival at the frontier gate. Lao Tzu informed Yin Shi he had had enough. He's giving up on all the wickedness and brutality of the times and was just going to wander the western regions and live like a hermit. Yin Shi said to Lao Tzu, "Wait, before you go, Lao Tzu, please write down for future generations the encapsulation of your teachings." Lao Tzu sat down and in one stream of consciousness wrote out 5,000 plus characters containing the essence of his thought, which would, later on during the Han Dynasty, come to be called Daoism, Daojia. When he was finished, he handed this 81-chapter first edition to Yin Shi, and that, my friends, was the Dao De Jing, Lao Tzu's antidote to cure all of society's ills and for people to live peacefully and naturally in harmony with nature. And then, as legend has it, Lao Tzu departed and was never heard from again. What year was this? No one knows, but it's estimated to be the 530s or so BCE. Cyrus the Great in Persia, and the time of the Buddha in Nepal and India. Speaking of the latter, Siddhartha Gautama, there are stories that, well, since the years sort of add up, fictional though they may be, some wrote that after Lao Tzu handed over the Dao De Jing to Yin Shi, he turned south and went straight to India. And no one could say for sure if he did or he didn't, but it said he ran into the Buddha. Just saying. So that is the historical fiction version of the life of Lao Tzu. Let us now try to unravel the meaning of the Dao De Jing and the early history of Daoism. The Daoism of Lao Tzu's age, which as I just mentioned wasn't even called Daoism yet, was not exactly the same as the Daoism that was later practiced in the Han, and for sure not in the later Han. Daoism is called one of the two indigenous religions of China, Confucianism being the other one, of course. But we're not going to concern ourselves much with Daoism the religion, or Dao Jiao. We're only looking at Daoism the philosophy, Daojia. Daoism the religion, Daoism the philosophy. It's not the same. And of course, I mentioned before, you can hardly call Confucianism a religion in the sense you could call Hinduism, Islam, or Christianity a religion. Dao means way. Actually, it means a lot of things, but for our purposes, it means way, road, or path. The Dao isn't the same as the forces of yin and yang, but they go hand in hand. The opening lines of the Dao De Jing in describing what the Dao is doesn't offer you too much hope of learning its meaning. It comes straight out and says, mere mortals cannot fathom its meaning. It is beyond words. You cannot name it. You could try to name it, call it the Dao, call it whatever you want, but the name doesn't describe it, and even if you think you have it figured out, let me assure you, you don't. The Dao is the origin and source of existence, if that helps you out. Lao Tzu himself said, quote, "He who knows the Dao does not speak. He who speaks of the Dao does not know." End quote. He believed silence and wisdom went hand in hand. Wisdom, Lao Tzu thought, was not transmitted by words, but instead by example and experience. The Dao De Jing is the guide that helps to explain this mysterious and cosmic power that's present in all natural things. It offers a primer on the proper conduct individuals should undertake in order to get it right. There are plenty of bad guys in Daoism. Intellectuals are not admired. Unlike Confucianism, Daoists believe to be educated and a scholar is completely of no use. In fact, Daoism considers the learned man a detriment to the state since he thinks in legalist principles that go completely against natural freedoms. And these legalist principles, they suppress humankind rather than provide benefits. Where legalism was concerned, Daoism purported that people are originally good and they espoused absolute individual freedom. Legalism, on the other hand, said people are originally bad and require total social control. Being a Daoist living under a legalist state ideology must have been torture. Daoists believed philosophic thought itself was superficial. They saw it as useful for causing arguments and creating deception. Daoists rejected that and idealized the simplicity of the Shang and the early Zhou dynasty days of the 2nd and 3rd millennium BCE. And they abhorred what China had become during the Eastern Zhou in the 4th and 5th centuries BCE. Children were idealized by Daoists for their innocence, and the idea of acquiring knowledge was looked down on. They said that Dao is to be found by rejecting the intellect and all its wares, and living a modest life of retirement and rusticity and quiet contemplation of nature. Lao Tzu despaired that people had lost their virtue, because they had too many desires and too much knowledge. Knowledge is, in itself, an object of desire. It enables people to know more about more objects of desire, and then serves as a means to gain these objects. As knowledge increases, so does one's desires. Lao Tzu had no use for this. He must have hated his job at the Zhou Imperial Library. The Daoist view is that everything was fine when times were simple, before the days when humans attained certain knowledge and began organizing societies, instituting laws, and building cities. Daoists believed a perfect world is one where people never interfered with nature or used their intelligence or power to, as the late Ned Beatty so eloquently put it back in the 1976 film Network, meddle with the primal forces of nature. Lao Tzu's recommended solution to all the corruption and violence of the Eastern Zhou was to return to a time that, although relatively primitive, was populated by human beings who would stand apart from all the corrupting influences of culture, literature, urbanization, laws, and all advances in the arts and sciences. Nature in the Daoist sense means natural activity. How everything flows in nature, all the seasonal cycles, the stars, the moon, the rainy season, the dry season, everything that is of nature, unchanging, not of humankind, of nature. Daoism embraces all of that, unreservedly. One of the holy grails of Daoism is to truly understand this nature, and the only way to understand it is to flow with it. How you flow with it? Well, that's where Daoism gets very, very intricate and complex. Lao Tzu said you needed to know the laws of nature and conduct yourself in accordance with these natural laws, because all the laws of nature were connected and form the substance of all reality, the absolute. Will Durant called Daoism, quote, a stoic obedience to nature and abandonment of all artifice and intellect, a trustful acceptance of nature's imperatives in instinct and feeling, a modest imitation of nature's silent ways, end quote. It's all about quiescence, being quiet, inactive, dormant, refusing to interfere with the natural course of things, the mark of a wise person. Practicing Daoism is all about this. The Dao invariably does nothing, and yet there is nothing that is not done. Sounds simple, but it isn't. This concept of quiescence and going with the flow in Chinese also has a name, and this is called Wu Wei. If you look up Wu Wei in a Chinese dictionary, it says inaction. Wu Wei is a hard one to really understand and get your arms around, especially in this 21st century hyper-materialist world that we live in. To practice Wu Wei in everything you do, which is what Lao Tzu essentially calls for, you achieve action through inaction. If you think this Wu Wei advocates getting stoned and sitting on the couch all day watching TV. It's not that kind of inaction. It is more of a kind of acting completely natural, not willfully. You're in tune with your surroundings and all the qi that surrounds you and is within you. Wu Wei has also been defined as perfect harmony between one's inner dispositions and their external movements in a natural, spontaneous, and unself-conscious way. It's not just about living like a recluse in nature. By practicing Wu Wei, you can achieve the power of emptiness, detachment, receptiveness, and spontaneity. Wu Wei touches on all of this. Wu Wei, being one with the Dao, meant that all these ideas also extended to governing. The Dao De Jing is peppered with words describing how a proper ruler should act. The people are wholly taken care of in every respect and are kept orderly and peaceful. Yet the ruler does nothing to force this to happen. The Daoists thought the Confucianists were crazy trying to impose all this order on forces beyond their control. In Daoist thought, there developed this notion of an ideal person, in the Daoist sense, that is, who is fit to rule, who follows the Dao and has achieved Zhenren, or perfected person status, but chooses to live apart from society and lives a life of simplicity. Here's an everyday example of how something is viewed through a Daoist pair of glasses. You're walking down Melrose Avenue and you find someone's wallet on the street. There's no looking inside to see how much money there is. Should I keep it, return it? There's none of this weighing the situation, imagining what the payoff might be if you return this wallet to its rightful owner. Lao Tzu would say without thinking, your natural concern is to find the owner of this wallet. In the true Daoist sense, this should be your natural course of action that you take. But as soon as you start thinking about potential benefit or acting righteously or calling this act of returning the wallet the righteous thing to do, you label your actions and now they become phony and artificial, being done for a reason rather than as a natural course of action, the Daoist way. Daoism also warns against the self-defeating consequences of being aggressive, proactive, and assertive in trying to get your way or to act in any way that could be construed to be self-aggrandizing, no matter if you're a nation, an army, or just an individual member of the human race. To quote Lao Tzu, or what Lao Tzu was purported to have said, quote, "If you do not quarrel, no one on earth will be able to quarrel with you. Recompense injury with kindness. To those who are good, I am good, and to those who are not good, I am also good. The softest thing in the world dashes against and overcomes the hardest. There is nothing softer or more weaker than water, and yet, for attacking things that are firm and strong, there is nothing that could take precedence of it." End quote.
If you're running a retail business, don't let disorganized order fulfillment cause chaos. Use ShipStation instead. From running a business out of your garage to multiple warehouses, ShipStation is ideal for every phase of your growth. Save time with one login for all your stores and by automating tasks. Plus, you'll get the best shipping rates from global carriers. Calm the chaos with the shipping software that delivers. Start a free trial at shipstation.com/audio. That's shipstation.com/audio.
Daoism calls for people to embrace a world of simplicity and silence. Wisdom in the Daoist sense isn't read in books or communicated by speech. A true follower of Daoism holds riches and power as unimportant. In short, it totally and wholeheartedly embraces a simple life. And 2,500 years ago, it was, only natural that people in general were less removed from nature than we are today in the 21st century. Living in tune with nature was more fresh in the memories and traditions of Zhou Dynasty Chinese than in these modern times. So when all of a sudden Daoist beliefs became more widespread and popularized, Daoism acted as a kind of black hole or a force of nature where these 1,000-year-old or more folk traditions from the Shang Dynasty and earlier just gravitated toward and became one with. When we talk about Daoism, the two central characters are Lao Tzu, who we already mentioned, and Zhuangzi. The two essential works of Daoism are the Dao De Jing and the Zhuangzi. Zhuangzi being the name of the philosopher credited with writing it as well as the name of the work itself. Lao Tzu is considered the founder, and Zhuangzi is considered the greatest disciple, or person who best articulated what Daoism was all about. Zhuangzi was born 160 years after the legendary date of Lao Tzu's passing, and time moved a lot slower back then than it does now, or maybe it just felt that way. Let's look at the Tao Te Ching. It's divided up into the Classic of Dao, the Daodejing, chapters 1 through 37, and the Classic of Virtue, the Daoijing. The book is chock full of aphorisms. The dictionary defines aphorisms as terse sayings that embody a general truth or an astute observation. When Lord Acton said, "Power tends to corrupt and absolute power corrupts absolutely," that's an aphorism. The Dao De Jing, it's got a lot of these. Like Confucianism, Daoism considers an ideal person to be a sage, a shengren, or better yet, a perfected person, a zhenren. If you read through the Dao De Jing, it gives you example after example of explanations how you too can achieve this status. A Confucian sage is someone who attained the highest ethical standards of benevolence and righteousness, the highest state a ruler can attain. But a Daoist sage is someone who fully embraces the Dao in every way. In order to be one with the universe, a Daoist sage has to transcend and forget distinctions between things. The way to do this is to do something anathema to Confucianists: discard knowledge. Discarding knowledge is a method used by Daoists to achieve sageliness within. Lao Tzu said, quote, "The sage ruler rules the people by emptying their minds, filling their bellies, weakening their wills, toughening their sinews, ever making the people without knowledge and without desire." End quote. Zhuangzi pointed a finger at the Daoists and accused them of being blinded by nature and that they had no knowledge of man. As far as all this Confucian teaching about cultivating one's own benevolence, righteousness, virtue, propriety, Daoists reject that outright. To carry out the act of trying to be virtuous was phony, artificial, and forced. It was anything but natural. The Tao Te Ching has been studied to death, and everyone agrees it was neither written by one person nor at one single time. In other words, like almost all of these Eastern Zhou-era classics, undue credit is given to one person. Well, that sure makes for a tidy and easy-to-open package. The early champions of the Tao Te Ching was Wang Bi. He lived during the Three Kingdoms period, and not for a long time either, from 226 to 249. He wasn't a Daoist, but he did write these earliest of commentaries on the Tao Te Ching that became de rigueur for any future scholar of Daoism. And his writings had a lot of lasting power, too. Wang Bi's commentaries are still referred to today in the 21st century. Han Feizi, by the way, also devoted a couple chapters in his eponymous work where he discussed Lao Tzu and the Dao De Jing. In 1993, in Guodian village near Jingmen in Hubei, west of Wuhan, the oldest copy of the Dao De Jing was found that was dated to somewhere around 300 BCE. So we know for sure this book goes back to at least the 4th century BCE, a good 200 years after Lao Tzu's legendary time walking this earth. 2 copies of the Tao Te Ching were amongst the silk texts discovered at Ma Wangdui that I mentioned last time. A tomb from the Han Dynasty was found intact 2nd century BCE, a little later than the Guodian texts unearthed in 1993. It maybe didn't have the hoopla and backstory that preceded the discovery of King Tutankhamun in November 1922, but this Ma Wangdui discovery made 50 years after Howard Carter's discovery in the world of Chinese culture and history was pretty big, man. These 2 versions of the Tao Te Ching discovered in the Han-era tomb were not the same as the long-accepted Wang Bi version. What was pulled out of Ma Wangdui were texts that used a different structure to order the chapters of the Dao De Jing. This was called Huanglao Daoism. The easiest way to differentiate Huanglao Daoism from the one we are all familiar with, Laozhuang Daoism, is this. Huanglao is considered more religious in nature. Laozhuang Daoism is the philosophical form of Daoism that has the works of Lao Tzu and Zhuangzi at its core. Huanglao stands for Huangdi and Lao Tzu, Huangdi being the Yellow Emperor, who I have it on good authority didn't get too personally involved in the writing of the text. And this Huanglao Daoism actually came out during the Han Dynasty, centuries after the earliest known version of the Dao De Jing. So let's pause right here and take a break. Next time we will look at Zhuangzi and learn all about this beloved character from Chinese history and his even more beloved book. If that isn't incentive enough to come back next time, then I don't know what is. This is Laszlo Montgomery signing off from the Southland here in sunny California and beseeching you, as I do from time to time, to come back next time for another exciting episode of the China History Podcast.
If you're running a retail business, don't let disorganized order fulfillment cause chaos. Use ShipStation instead. From running a business out of your garage to multiple warehouses, ShipStation is ideal for every phase of your growth. Save time with one login for all your stores and by automating tasks. Plus, you'll get the best shipping rates from global carriers. Calm the chaos with the shipping software that delivers. Start a free trial at shipstation.com/audio. That's shipstation.com/audio.